For this video, I'm going to rate my favorite roller coasters at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. You better strap yourself in. I'm sure this video will trigger some people. Okay, so I need to start this video with a couple disclaimers. First of all, I absolutely love Cedar Point. It is one of my all-time faves. The fact that they've crammed so many amazing rides in that peninsula is just amazing to me. Second thing, I'm a wildly erratic and inconsistent person. So these are the way I rated these roller coasters this particular day. Yesterday, my ratings were probably different, and tomorrow I'll probably change my mind on all these rankings. Just be aware of that. But as of today, this is how I rated all the roller coasters here at Cedar Point. Number 17, Wilderness Run. I don't think it was going to be a shock to anybody that one of the kiddie coasters was going to finish dead last. And to be honest, this is a pretty solid kiddie coaster. You know, I've been on worse rides at other parks for sure, but this is one of the more mediocre ones. I will say this, I do like all the landscaping and foliage and trees that surround this roller coaster, so I feel like it's not really a bad experience, but obviously if you're going to Cedar Point, this is not the rides that are drawing people to the park. It is what it is. I mean, if it's a walk-on and you got little kids, then I would say this is definitely worth the ride. Otherwise, it's a skip for me. Number 16, the Woodstock Express. Let's face it, you really have to cut some slack to these little kiddie coasters. You know, they are pretty good coasters, and quite honestly, these Vekoma roller skaters are smoother ridings than some of the star attractions here at Cedar Point, so this is not a bad experience. It's just a very tame and just kind of mediocre experience for anybody over the age of probably about 8 or 9. There's just not a lot of thrills here. However, it's still a fun ride. You know, if lines are short, you might ride this just for the coaster credit. You know, the problem with Vekoma roller skaters is they're pretty much at every regional amusement park. So there's nothing really about this that is special for Cedar Point. That's why this one's sitting towards the basement when it comes to the rankings. Number 15, Wicked Twister. Alright, so I am not a fan of this ride, obviously placing it really low. I just feel like this is just another kind of boomerang where it's really repetitive. You're just kind of going backwards and forwards, and the ride elements themselves with the twisting, it does nothing for me. I was really underwhelmed with this particular ride. I feel like Cedar Point overhyped it when they opened it, and it's just not something that I ride when I go to the park now. You know, there's so many good rides at Cedar Point that I really don't waste my time on the ones that are like this. I don't see the appeal. I guess it's a small footprint, so that's why it'll still be there probably 15 years from now, but it's just not a great ride. Number 14, Top Thrill Dragster. Okay, so I'm already bracing myself for all the negative comments that I'm going to get on YouTube for making this pick. I realize how groundbreaking this ride must have been when it first opened. I just don't feel like it's held up well over time. The ride still has one of the most amazing launches of any roller coaster. Hitting such a high speed in a 3-second launch is incredible. But that's the whole damn ride. When you think about it, you've got this amazing launch, the top hat, and the drop, and then you're just kind of coasting. It's kind of a one-hit wonder for me. I feel like when they were building this thing, it was all about setting records and not the overall ride experience. Once you ride this thing once or twice, you're like, yeah, that's nice, and you move on. Top Thrill Dragster just doesn't have the re-rideability of a great coaster, in my opinion. And keep in mind, that's what these picks are. Just my opinion. And there's really nothing anyone can say that's going to change that opinion of this particular ride. Number 13, the Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Okay, so I'm probably getting notorious for several things nowadays, and one of them is probably overrating mine train rides. My first roller coaster was Thunder Mountain, and there's always, I guess, a bias towards rides that have a similar theme. A lot of people scratch their heads when I rated the mine train ride at Six Flags St. Louis so high, and people are probably gonna be groaning that I actually picked this above Top Thrill Dragster and maybe even Wicked Twister. But at the end of the day, I really do enjoy this ride. It's fairly smooth considering its age, and this is the ride that I would introduce my kids to as a first roller coaster over, Wilderness Run or some of the other tiny roller coasters. Because this one, I feel like you're getting to the level of thrills of an adult coaster while still not being totally watered down like a kiddie coaster. I just feel like this is a great balanced experience, which is kind of rare at Cedar Point. Most of these roller coasters are really damn intense, and then there are others that are just so watered down as kiddie coasters that they're almost like pointless. I feel like this is a great middle ground, and Cedar Point really could use a couple more middle ground coasters like this one. Number 12, Magnum XL-200. Okay, so as we close in on the top 10, we're now getting to the rides where I feel these are must-ride attractions. Everything in my top 12, I feel you have to experience if you're going to Cedar Fair. So Magnum XL-200 is considered the very first hypercoaster. And what's interesting about it is it was built such a long time ago by Aerodynamics. This coaster was pretty much shaped on location. Nowadays, they will build the tracks and have them, computer designed, fitted on location, so everything's very precise. Well, here, they were custom welding and bending the pipes of the track, kind of like a custom exhaust system on a car, where everything was just kind of bolted and banged around until every track piece fit into place. And you can see that the ride isn't the smoothest because the track profile is kind of funky in sections. And that's just because of the primitive way that this ride was built. And that's kind of what gives it character too. I love this thing. I love the old school aero approach to just kind of experimenting and see what happens, and you can feel that in this ride, and it's got a very visceral experience. I highly recommend it if you're feeling nostalgia for old school Cedar Fair. Number 11, Raptor. Suspended roller coasters are generally a hit and miss kind of proposition. The Vekoma SLC coasters are notorious for being rough riding headbangers. Thankfully, the Raptor is a suspended coaster built by B&M. Even if it was built way back in 1994, it's still an amazing smooth riding, comfortable experience. This is a great roller coaster, and one of the better offerings built in the 90s. It's intense, it's got quite a few inversions. The first drop is about 140 feet high, so by Cedar Fair standards, it's not really one of the big coasters anymore, but it still packs a lot of punch for its size. If you just ride one suspended roller coaster this year, this should be the one. Number 10, Gatekeeper. Okay, so I'm not a huge fan of wing coasters, but if you're gonna ride one, then this is the one to ride. Just having that first drop over by the waterfront really does push this one over the top for me. When it comes to the whole roller coaster experience, the topography and scenery definitely factor into it for me. This particular roller coaster's layout combined with its location make it the best wing coaster out there. And it's silky smooth too. You don't really bounce around like some of the other wing coasters that are out there. Again, it's a B&M coaster, so that's kind of a given. Now that we've officially broken into the top 10, these are all must-ride experiences. You really can't go to Cedar Point without riding these amazing roller coasters. Number 9, Gemini. Alright, this pick is going to trigger some people. I know the general consensus in the roller coaster community is that this ride is just getting too old. And it was built a long time ago by Aero, back in 1978. There's something special about racing coasters. They're drying up. There's not a lot of them anymore. I remember riding Dueling Dragons and Gwazi in Florida all the time. Those are distant memories now. The theme park industry has been moving away from racing coasters for the past decade. mostly over safety concerns. Nowadays, tourists are carrying so many possible projectiles, like cell phones and sunglasses and hats and sports bottles, whatever, that people are getting hit by debris from the train they're racing. So I get why these things are going away. Because of all that, it makes me appreciate this classic so much more. And let's face it, Gemini is not the most attractive coaster to look at, but at the end of the day, it offers a lot of thrills. You should take advantage of riding this racing coaster because I don't know how much longer it's going to be around. Number 8, Iron Dragon. You know, a lot of people are shocked at the age of this ride. It's a suspended coaster that was built way back in 1987. It's a classic. You know, aerodynamics isn't really known for building suspended coasters. And this coaster is basically the granddaddy that started it all. By today's standards, it's really tame. It only has a top speed of 40 miles an hour. Its maximum height is 76 feet. On paper, this thing doesn't look that great, but I'm telling you, this packs a lot of punch. This is a really fun machine, and it's one of my hidden gems of Cedar Point. I think a lot of people overlook it because of its size, but I love this thing. The fact that the train cars actually swing in the corners makes this ride really amazing. I hope they keep this one running as long as possible because it's such a unique experience. This is like a must ride. You gotta experience this thing, even if it is an old one. Number 7, the Corkscrew. Yeah, I know, I picked another Arrow coaster in my top 10. I realize I'm a little biased, but at the end of the day, this thing is iconic. Do you know how many postcards and television ads and magazine ads that I saw with this roller coaster showing off Cedar Point? Too many for me to count. This thing was everywhere. It was a world record holder when it was built in 1976. It happens to be the first roller coaster ever built with 3 inversions. It's 40 years later now, and that Corkscrew still looks amazing. And to be honest, by Arrow standards, this is a fairly smooth riding machine. It definitely is one of the nicer maintained Arrow coasters out there. You're not just riding a roller coaster here, you're riding history. And if you are looking for that time capsule back to the 1970s, well, look no further. You definitely have to go for a ride on the Corkscrew. Number 6, Valravn. What can I say? B&M makes some of the smoothest roller coasters out there. Even though I'm not a huge fan of dive coasters, this is one of the best ones I've ever been on. It's got some amazing stats. It's about 5 years old now, built in 2016. The first drop is 214 feet high. It's got 3 inversions, and it hits a top speed of 75 miles an hour. Clearly, it's not one of the largest coasters here at the park. You know, the hypers are definitely a lot larger. Having said that, it's one of the best dive coasters in the entire world. When it was built in 2016, it broke a bunch of world records, including being the tallest dive coaster, the fastest dive coaster, the longest dive coaster, the longest drop on a dive coaster, the most inversions on a dive coaster, and the overall highest inversion on a dive coaster. So this thing was a monster when it opened. It still holds up quite well. You should definitely check it out. Number 5, Mantis. This thing was named Mantis. I'm going to call it Mantis. Damn it. This coaster has an interesting history. It opened originally in 1996 as Mantis, and it was a stand-up roller coaster built by B&M. At the time, it was the tallest, fastest, and longest roller coaster of its kind in the entire world. In 2015, the trains got converted into a floorless coaster, and that's what prompted the name change to the Rougarou. This is probably a controversial pick. I know some people really hate this coaster. I personally love it. I think it's a fun experience. Maybe it's my bias towards coasters built by B&M, but I really enjoy this one. I still am going to recommend this one, although I realize there are going to be a core group of people that are just going to hate this thing outright, just because of what it is. Number 4, Blue Streak. A classic wooden roller coaster built by the Philadelphia Toboggan Company in my top 5. I bet you didn't see that one coming. For me, the classics never die, and I go to Kennywood all the time just to ride classic wooden roller coasters, just like this one. This is an amazing experience. It's the oldest roller coaster still operating in Cedar Point. It opened in 1964. I'm not alone in my admiration for the Blue Streak. This consistently wins awards for the Golden Ticket Awards for being one of the world's top wooden roller coasters. Even though on paper it's nothing to call home about, there's just a certain magic to this particular out-and-back wooden roller coaster. This roller coaster was designed by Frank Hoover and John Allen, legendary roller coaster builders. It has a height of 78 feet and hits a top speed of 40 miles an hour. By modern roller coaster standards, the ride is kind of rough, but you owe it to yourself to go a little old school on your visit, and that's why it's in my top 5. Number 3, Maverick. A family coaster in my top 5? What the hell? Cedar Point, just like Busch Gardens Tampa, has learned that sometimes a crowd pleaser, such as Maverick or Cheetah Hunt, is timeless. Let's face it, they're starting to hit their engineering limits when it comes to just how tall some of these roller coasters can get. I mean, you can't feasibly build a 1,000-foot roller coaster, at least not yet. So a ride like Maverick is designed to give thrills to pretty much every audience, whether it's kids, teenagers, adults, like thrill seekers. This thing is basically shooting for the mainstream and does it so damn well. With all the different launches and top hats and lack of inversions, it's just a fun time. And fun is a great word to describe something like Maverick. I think this is the most fun coaster in Cedar Point. It's definitely not the most extreme by any measure, but there's something that just puts a smile on your face when you ride this thing. If you can just ride one roller coaster in the entire park, this is the one I'd probably start with. It's just that good. Trust me. Number 2, Steel Vengeance. So here's another coaster with an interesting history. This was built as the world's tallest wooden roller coaster in the world back in 1991. When it debuted, it was known as the Mean Streak. And that was a great name for it because it was also probably the world's roughest riding roller coaster. This thing beat the crap out of you. I remember getting bruises when I rode it back in the 90s. However, in 2018, it was completely rebuilt by the Rocky Mountain Construction Company. And RMC is known for converting old rough riding coasters into silky smooth experiences. They use this vinyl-coated iBox and topper track that really takes a lot of these old wooden structures and stiffens them up and makes the train cars glide right over them. I don't know what magic potion RMC is using to do these conversions, but whatever it is, it's definitely working. This is a must-ride attraction. Even if there's a long line, you have to experience this at least once. It's that good. Number 1, Millennium Force. Alright, I realize this is going to be another controversial pick. This ride is 20 years old now, and some people in the roller coaster community feel like it is getting dated, and there are others that feel like this ride has been eclipsed by newer competitors like Fury 325 and Steel Dragon. I disagree with those assessments. I realize those coasters have larger drops, but this one is just the better experience. Having that giant drop right near the water, the location of this one is just superior to the other attractions. You know, if you were talking about Fury 325, technically it is the bigger coaster, but Carowinds, come on, you might invest in some landscaping. When you ride that one, you're like, oh wow, grass. Look at that, there's a mound of dirt. Seriously, Carowinds, compared to the way this ride looks and darts in between actual scenery, Millennium Force still is my favorite Giga. And I also need to point out that this was the world's first Giga coaster. It set so many world records when it opened. The historical significance really pushes this just ahead, in my opinion. And on top of that, the location and surroundings it's just the best of the Gigas out there by far, and one of the smoothest running out there. Even the color scheme is amazing. There's nothing I would change on this ride, and that is why it's my favorite roller coaster at Cedar Point. If you enjoyed today's rankings of the best roller coasters at Cedar Point, please like and subscribe. I've got more videos on the way.